He raised his glass, smiled wide, and said, "I'd never really left home, not even emotionally." Name's David. I'm 54, used to teach until I realized silence cuts deeper than noise. The cloth napkin in my hand was folded perfectly, until it wasn't. Ever been the joke in a room full of people who should have known better? Tell me, what would you have done? I hadn't heard from Adam in nearly a year. No texts, no birthday call. Just silence, the kind that hums underneath everything until it becomes part of the background noise. Then came the envelope, cream-colored, expensive-looking, and heavier than it had any right to be. It sat awkwardly among utility bills and grocery coupons, looking like it had taken a wrong turn into the wrong life. I stood over the sink, coffee going cold, staring at my name printed in calligraphy. I knew my brother didn't write himself. David Thomas Wells, no middle initial. He always forgot I dropped it after college. A small thing, sure, but those small things add up. A year ago, my neighbor Miriam, who means well in the way retired librarians always do, had offered this after overhearing one of my rare phone calls with Barbara. My mother. "Maybe your family just doesn't know how to talk to you," I remember answering with a half smile. "No, they just don't try." She didn't press. She never does. That's why I like her. I opened the envelope slowly, like something might bite. And there it was, Adam's wedding invitation. Slate gray lettering on thick cardstock. A botanical border. "We joyfully invite you to the union of Adam Wells and Claire Simmons." I stopped reading. Claire. I remembered her faintly. A quiet woman with laugh lines around her eyes and a strange way of making space feel calmer. I met her once briefly at Thanksgiving, just before everything fell apart. I dropped the invitation on the counter and walked away. In my mind, I could already hear the reception, Barbara introducing Adam with pride. My youngest, Dr. Adam Wells, and then gesturing vaguely in my direction. "And this is David. He's between things." That's what she'd said last Thanksgiving while passing me the cranberry sauce. I hadn't corrected her. I'd just smiled and looked at my plate. The apartment creaked as I moved my knees, cracking in response. I shuffled into the living room, stepping over an unopened box labeled "Books to Donate," which had been sitting there since 2021. The TV remote was buried beneath a week's worth of mail and a flyer about discounted eyeglasses. I sat down anyway. I wasn't going to go. That was clear. I didn't belong there, hadn't for years. Adam and I used to be close in the way brothers who share a room and a PlayStation tend to be. But success drew lines, and silence widened them. He went to med school. I took a detour through a teaching job that I no longer had a brief stint at a nonprofit, and now I edited online copy for a furniture store's website. Freelance, of course. Flexible schedule. Code for unmoored. I told myself no, then maybe. Then no again. I poured another cup of coffee, burnt and bitter. I stood by the window for no reason. I turned the radio on, then off. At some point, without realizing it, I sat down at my computer and typed in Navy suit rental near me. The website loaded slowly. I clicked through styles: modern classic, relaxed, fit. None of them looked like me. I chose one anyway. Slightly outdated, not too flashy. The kind you wear when you don't want to be remembered for what you wore. A keychain from my old teaching job caught my eye. It sat in a drawer I rarely opened, tucked between expired coupons and spare buttons. It had the school's logo faded now, and a small inscription, "Mr. Wells. Thank you for seeing me." No date. No name. Just that. I closed the drawer before the ache could settle. Later that night, I hovered over the RSVP form on Adam's wedding website. The page pulsed softly, asking, "Will you attend?" My hand hovered over the mouse. It didn't tremble from nerves, but from the familiar weight of being overlooked, of returning to a table where your chair always feels temporary. I clicked yes. Then I closed the tab, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I told myself I was doing it for closure. But truthfully, I just didn't want to be forgotten again. When the hostess said table 14, I smiled. That's where they always put the extras near the kitchen, close to the restrooms, just out of frame. You learn to expect it after a while. Like being handed the store-brand soda at a cookout, or being seated near the exit on Christmas morning. Not mean-spirited, just convenient. The reception hall in Hoboken was beautiful. Cream linens, soft jazz, floor-to-ceiling windows that let the late spring light stretch across polished floors. There were peonies in square vases and a champagne fountain that no one used, but everyone admired. I stood near the entrance longer than I should have, unsure of where to walk, unsure if I should even smile. My suit felt like it had borrowed me, not the other way around. Navy blue, rented snug in the shoulders, with a shirt collar that scratched like it remembered being starch at a cheaper dry cleaner. I ran my hand down the front once, then again, before following the hostess past clustered tables of people who didn't look up. Table 14 was behind a wide, decorative column near where the kitchen doors swung open and shut like lungs. A man in a bow tie slipped past me with a tray of asparagus and nearly caught my chair leg. He muttered sorry without eye contact and disappeared through the silver doors. I sat. The chair was firm and didn't wobble, which I took as a small victory. The tablecloth was spotless. There were 5 place settings. Mine was at the corner, where you could stretch your legs, but not your presence. I folded the cloth napkin in front of me once, then again. Then again. A tiny, meaningless ritual. I told myself I was smoothing out creases, but maybe I was just trying to vanish into it. Barbara approached a few minutes later, holding a flute of something bubbly and wearing a smile that was mostly teeth. "Glad you could make it," she said, brushing invisible lint off her already immaculate dress. "The salmon's lovely. No hug? No. You look well? Just salmon." I nodded. "Looks good." Then she was gone off to hug someone taller, louder, more promising. A memory surfaced then, uninvited, Barbara telling a neighbor years ago David's just sensitive. Always has been. The neighbor, a woman who smelled like cinnamon and menthol, had smiled and replied, "Sensitive people usually see more." Barbara laughed like it was charming. I never forgot it. Someone sat next to me, a man I almost recognized. Ben. We'd gone to college together, shared a dorm wall. He glanced at me, did the mental math, then offered a tight nod before turning toward the other side of the table, where someone more lucrative had just arrived. I didn't blame him. The music swelled for a moment, and then quieted as the waitstaff brought out plates, lemon butter chicken, scalloped potatoes, asparagus stalks stacked like lumber. It smelled good. I wasn't hungry. I took a bite anyway. I was on my second sip of water when Claire appeared. I didn't hear her approach. She just materialized beside me, radiant in a way that didn't need sparkle. Her dress was simple but elegant, and her hair had been swept up with soft defiance. Her eyes landed on me like she meant it. "Are you doing okay with all the noise?" she asked, not pitying, curious. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just taking it all in." She smiled, not the kind people give when they're being polite. "It's a lot," she said. "Let me know if you want to step out later. The terrace is quieter." Before I could respond, she touched my sleeve lightly. Not flirtation, not consolation. Just presence. recognition. Then she moved on smiling at an aunt who was already calling her name. I looked down. My hand was still on the napkin, folded into a tight square like something ceremonial. I placed it gently on my lap, careful not to unfold it. More guests arrived. Laughter echoed from the main table where Adam sat, glowing his hand in Claire's, his laugh confident, unrehearsed. He was always good at being the sun in a room full of planets. I didn't resent it. Not really. I just wasn't built for gravity. Then a clink of glass. A microphone crackled. Adam stood, straightened his tie, and grinned. "All right, folks," he said, tapping the mic. "Let's lighten the mood a little." My stomach clenched, not from nerves exactly, but from memory. I'd heard that tone before. College parties. Family barbecues. The voice he used when he wanted to shift attention, and didn't mind burning a bridge to do it. I reached again for my napkin. Folded. Unfolded. Then folded again. "I guess some people just never leave home," Adam said into the microphone, his smile widening as a few guests chuckled. Not even emotionally. The line hung there, a balloon filled with something sour. My fork paused mid-air. I hadn't even touched the asparagus, just pushed it from one end of the plate to the other, like a kid pretending to eat. The lemon butter chicken had gone cold long ago, but now even breathing felt optional. He stood under the soft lights near the sweetheart table, a sculpted vision in tailored navy and a crisp white pocket square. The kind of man who always had a story ready, who made you feel like the story was about you, but somehow you'd missed the joke. This one time, Adam continued scanning the crowd. David got so nervous before a school dance he threw up in the driveway and blamed it on bad soup. More laughter. Mom told him, "You'll never charm a girl with that stomach of yours." Barbara laughed out loud freely, as if she hadn't rehearsed the memory before. She raised her glass slightly and took a long sip. Her earrings caught the light just right. She looked pleased. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I could feel the warmth of her amusement from across the room. It landed like frost. The napkin in my hand was no longer folded. I'd been twisting it unconsciously now. It resembled something torn and anxious, like the inside of my chest. Adam went on. "David's always been special, sensitive, smart in his own way. Just never quite found his place, I guess." That word again, sensitive. It had followed me like an unpaid bill since childhood. I'd once thought it meant I cared deeply. But in our family, it meant I couldn't take a joke, couldn't take criticism, couldn't be part of the team. Someone at a nearby table laughed too loudly, Ben, maybe. Or someone who wanted Adam's attention later. Another guest smiled with tight lips and looked down at her plate. A man in a gray suit coughed into his champagne. My stomach clenched. Not out of shame. Not even anger. Just a familiar ache, like the kind that shows up after bad news you already knew was coming. Years ago, when I left my job at the hospital after the burnout diagnosis, Barbara had pulled me aside and said, "Just don't embarrass the family." That was all she asked. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Do you need help?" Just don't make her uncomfortable in front of other people. And now here I was doing just that simply by existing at the wrong table, in the wrong suit, with the wrong kind of silence. I pushed my chair back. The sound of it scraping against the floor wasn't loud, but it felt deafening to me. My hand brushed against the side of the table. A champagne flute tipped and wobbled, didn't fall, but someone caught it with just enough grace to look annoyed. I stood steady, but not sure where I was going. And then Claire stood. Her movement was sudden yet elegant, like someone waking up from a dream and remembering she had something urgent to say. "Is this what love looks like in your family?" she asked. The microphone was still in Adam's hand, but now it was useless. Her voice didn't need amplification. It cut through the air because it carried something sharper than volume truth. The room went still. Not polite stillness. Not the kind you get during speeches or slow dances. This was raw, unscripted. Forks froze mid-bite. Glasses hovered an inch from lips. The jazz trio in the corner went quiet, unsure if they should keep playing. Even the air seemed to wait. Adam blinked, the smile faltering for the first time. Barbara lowered her glass. Claire reached up and without ceremony removed her veil. Not with drama, but with clarity. As if removing it helped her see more clearly, helped all of us see what we hadn't been willing to admit, that the performance was over. She laid the veil gently on the table. Not discarded, just done. I didn't sit back down. I didn't speak. But in that moment, something in me, some tightly wound part of my past, loosened just enough to breathe. I looked around the room. The guests weren't smiling now. A few looked confused. Some looked embarrassed. And a handful looked like they understood. From the far end of the hall, someone's champagne glass trembled, not from laughter this time, but from restraint. Like they, too, were holding back something they hadn't dared release until now. Claire didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just stood there in her wedding dress, veil, gone bouquet still in hand, and stared at Adam like she had all the time in the world. And suddenly, time bent toward her. The room, its clinking glassware, murmuring guests, and the faint buzz of soft jazz stilled. Adam's confident posture wilted a little. His hand holding the mic drifted downward. He looked over his shoulder toward his groomsmen, as if one of them might rescue him from the silence. "Mocking someone for surviving isn't love," Claire said. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It carried the kind of quiet that made people lean in rather than pull back. The kind of quiet that reminded you how loud cruelty could be, even when wrapped in humor. Barbara blinked, caught off guard. She opened her mouth. "Claire, honey?" But Claire turned to her without hesitation. "This isn't about appearances, Barbara, and it's not about family saving face." Her tone never sharpened, never wavered. It simply held. You could feel the heat leaving the room like a collective exhale no one realized they'd been holding. Someone at a nearby table set down their fork slowly. A college-aged guest near the back of the room, someone I didn't know, but Claire might have quietly pulled out their phone and hit record. Not in malice, but instinct. We live in a world where truth often requires evidence. I remained seated, stunned. Not because someone had finally stood up for me, but because Claire had made something visible that I'd spent years trying to make invisible. Me. All those moments I had shrunk away. All the times I folded myself down so no one else had to feel uncomfortable by my presence. It had become a kind of habit, like adjusting your seatbelt or apologizing for existing too long in someone's line of sight. And now she had said plainly what I never could, that kindness is not a decoration, that dignity isn't negotiable. I felt people looking at me, but differently now. Not like I was fragile or odd, not even sympathetic. Just watching. Like maybe they'd missed something important the first time and were trying to see more clearly now. Claire walked slowly to the front table, where she and Adam were supposed to sit for their first meal as husband and wife. She rested her bouquet beside a half-filled champagne glass, then carefully laid her veil across the microphone stand. It draped like silk surrender, not to conflict, but to clarity. She looked down at her hands, then up at us. "This wedding won't continue unless dignity is restored," she said. That was it. No ultimatums, no demands, just truth measured and unadorned. Adam stood there, lips parted, stunned into stillness. The microphone still in his hand, now without purpose. Barbara looked around, seeking allies. None came. Even Reverend Paul looked down at his shoes. The silence pressed against everyone equally, like gravity turned up just enough to notice. Claire stepped away from the table and began walking straight down the aisle between guests, past clustered tables, champagne pyramids, and someone's elderly aunt, who looked mildly thrilled by the drama. But Claire wasn't heading toward the exit. She was walking toward me. She never said a word. Not as she passed a groomsman still holding his beer midair. Not when she slipped past the waiter who'd nearly tripped on my chair an hour earlier. Not when she reached table 14. The room parted for her like water. People shifted instinctively, some standing, others craning their necks. Even the string quartet in the corner remained motionless bows hovering, as if music itself was unsure how to proceed. Claire stopped in front of me. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Not because she was the bride, not even because she'd spoken up, but because in her eyes I saw no performance, no pity, just presence. She didn't extend her hand, didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't have to. Her very act, calm and unwavering, had said everything. And I realized in that moment something unexpected. I hadn't been rescued. I'd been remembered. I'd been reminded that I still mattered, not because I'd accomplished anything grand or changed anyone's mind, but because somehow I was still here. Still standing. Still someone worth seeing. Years ago, when I was in the hospital, a nurse with soft hands and a tired smile once told me, "You're not broken. You've just been left outside too long." I didn't understand her then. I do now. In the wake of Claire's quiet rebellion, the room held its breath. Something sacred had happened, though no one could quite name it. A few tables over, I saw someone wipe the corner of their eye. A man in a blue tie nodded, barely perceptible. And somewhere near the dessert table, someone finally picked up a flute and took a long, steady sip. But no one filled the silence, because the silence didn't need filling. Claire didn't return to the front. She didn't sit with me either. She simply walked past veilless bouquet abandoned and stood near the back, where the light from the terrace spilled in gently, her spine straight, her expression unreadable but not cold. She just stood like someone who'd made peace with the cost of doing what was right. And I sat still, half in shock, but beginning to breathe again. I didn't say goodbye. Claire didn't either. But under my salad plate, hidden beneath a few stray crumbs of bread and a linen napkin that had long since lost its starch, was a note. Folded once, addressed in clean handwriting that simply read, "David." I held it like it might vanish. Around me, the room had begun to empty. Chairs scraped softly against hardwood. Champagne flutes clinked dully as someone gathered them into a tray. The lights had shifted brighter now, practical, like the illusion had been turned off and the cleanup had begun. I slipped the note into my coat pocket and didn't open it right away. Not out of fear, just I wasn't sure if I had room for anything more. In the parking lot, the night had cooled. My rental car sat under one of those old sodium lights, casting shadows that pulsed ever so slightly. I climbed into the driver's seat, the upholstery stiff, still smelling faintly of lemon from the rental agency. I turned the key and let the engine idle. A jazz station played softly Coltrane, or maybe someone who wanted to be. The music filled the empty car like memory. That's when I unfolded the note. My father died when I was 19. People said it was sudden, but silence isn't sudden. Silence is slow and cruel. It builds like frost until everything warm inside you is numb, and you don't even remember what it felt like before. I saw that same frost tonight, David. On your face, around your family. I've seen it before, and I won't let it win again. You didn't deserve what they did to you, and you don't need their apology to start again. Claire. I don't remember crying. It wasn't like the movies, no gasps, no pounding on the steering wheel. Just a slow warmth in my eyes, then wet on my face, and finally the quiet, involuntary release of something I hadn't known I'd been holding. A lifetime of trying to disappear. I didn't wipe my face right away. Outside the car, someone in a wrinkled tux walked across the parking lot. Maybe a distant cousin. Maybe someone who'd come for the open bar and stayed for the spectacle. I watched him toss his boutonniere into the trash before heading toward a ride-share. For some reason, I didn't drive home. Instead, I turned right out of the lot and drove 20 minutes west toward a place I hadn't visited in years, my old school. I'd taught history there for 9 years before things unraveled. Before my mind, once so quick with names and dates and essay prompts, became fogged over with something the doctors called major depressive disorder. Before I took the leave of absence that never really ended. The school was dark, of course. Only a few safety lights buzzed in the parking lot. A janitor bundled in a heavy hoodie locked the side doors of the gym. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did, and knew better than to ask why someone would be sitting alone in a car this late at night, engine humming, windows fogging. I used to stand in those hallways and tell the quiet kids, the ones who never raised their hands, that their voices mattered. That history belonged to everyone. That just because they weren't loud didn't mean they weren't worth hearing. Funny how we're best at giving the advice we never take. I rested Claire's note on my lap. The edges were already softening from where I'd folded and unfolded it. I smoothed it flat against my knee. You didn't deserve what they did to you, she had written. And you don't need their apology to start again. That line stayed with me like a breath I hadn't exhaled yet. All this time I'd been waiting for what? An apology that wouldn't come, a moment where someone would say, "We were wrong to treat you like you were less." Claire hadn't apologized on their behalf. She hadn't tried to fix anything. She had just seen me, fully, without flinching. The jazz station kept playing something with a muted trumpet now wistful and steady, and I whispered to myself so softly that I wasn't sure I'd actually said it aloud. I made it, and I meant it. It wasn't a triumph. It wasn't redemption. But it was mine, a quiet reclaiming of space, of breath, of the right to exist without explanation. I turned the key to silence the engine. Just sat there for a while, hands on the wheel forehead resting against it, like I used to after a long parent-teacher conference. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once. A train whistle blew. Life indifferent and steady. And then my phone buzzed. I blinked, reached into my coat pocket. The screen lit up. It was a message from Marcus, a guy I hadn't talked to in over a year. We'd once taught summer school together before he moved to Connecticut. "Dude, you're in this video with the bride. 60K views. You gotta see this." Attached was a link. I stared at it. Claire. The moment. Someone had filmed it. Part of me recoiled privacy exposure, the anxiety of being known by strangers who hadn't earned the right to judge. But another part, older, maybe wiser, just watched the screen flicker and thought, maybe silence doesn't get to win this time. There were no updates, no formal statement, no postponement, no wedding photos surfacing a month late with a new date and different smiles. Just silence. And then, life. It had been 6 months since Claire stood between an open mic and a closed-hearted room, since her veil became a flag of something unspoken, but deeply understood, since a video clip turned into 60,000 views, then 100,000, then a quiet ripple of messages in comment sections that said things like, "I wish someone had done this for me," and she saw him. There was no follow-up scandal, no drama, no wedding rescheduled, no reconciliation photos, and for once, that absence didn't ache. My apartment looked different now. It wasn't drastic, just lighter. The books were still there, but some now faced outward. A potted spider plant sat on the windowsill. I had to move it once a week to keep the sun from burning its edges. A folding table took up the center of the room, scattered with lined notebooks, colored pens and half-finished poems written by kids who were just learning that their voices had weight. Tasha sat across from me now, mid-20s, former student whip-smart. She helped me run a local youth writing group we started in September. Twice a week, kids who didn't quite fit anywhere else came to my one-bedroom apartment, dragged chairs around the table, and wrote about things they couldn't say out loud. One boy, Eli, maybe 12, read a poem he'd scribbled on loose leaf. He called it Quiet Hero. He didn't look up as he read, voice soft, but each line landed with the kind of truth adults forget how to speak. He doesn't wear a cape, but he holds a door for you when the world won't. He listens like it's a gift, not a job. He's the kind of quiet that makes you brave. When he finished, no one clapped. We didn't do that here. We just nodded, murmured thank you, and meant it. Tasha looked over at me and said, not quietly, "They listen because you don't make noise." I smiled, not because it was praise, but because it was true. I'd spent most of my life folding myself into corners to avoid being seen, and now somehow that instinct had become a kind of strength. Not the kind you wield, but the kind you lend out when someone else needs it. After the group dispersed, kids grabbing their coats, mumbling, "See you next times," I stayed behind to clean up the cookie crumbs and stray pencil shavings. The apartment was quiet again. But this time I didn't fear the silence. It felt earned, like something I could sit inside without having to explain myself. My phone buzzed. It was Claire. "Still rooting for you, always. No context, no build-up. Just that." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back a photo of the small whiteboard the kids had used earlier to brainstorm metaphors. It was messy, smudged in places, a few misspellings, but in the corner someone had written, "We write, so the world doesn't forget us." Underneath the photo, I typed one line, "Still standing," and hit send. On the wall above the folding table, I'd hung a still frame from that viral video. Someone had sent it to me printed and matted, Claire in her wedding dress standing firm with a microphone in her hand. The room behind her blurred like she was the only one truly in focus. Beneath the image, a small plaque read, "Courage isn't always loud." I looked at it now and felt the opposite of shame. There's something about being seen and not needing to shrink afterward. Something steadying, like standing on a porch in the wind and realizing you're not being blown over anymore. I hadn't spoken to Adam. Or Barbara. There was nothing left to say. And for once, I didn't crave that closure. Claire had said something in her note that stuck with me. You don't need their apology to start again. I believed her now. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. The plant on the windowsill stretched slightly toward the last of the day's sun. I turned off the jazz station and let the quiet take over. Some days you don't need an apology. You just need a room that lets you stay and a reason to stay in it. And today I had both. Sometimes silence is louder than apology, and softer than blame. In the end, I didn't need a family that cheered for me. I just needed a space where I could belong without shrinking. We don't always get to fix what broke us, but we can choose to stop carrying the sharpest pieces. Healing isn't about erasing what happened, it's about making room for what comes next. If this story reminded you of a time you stood alone or finally stood tall, I hope you'll share it. Because sometimes remembering we're not the only ones is its own kind of peace.